Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sydney, and if you are new here, this is just a place where we can talk about true crime, spooky, scary stories, dark history, or whatever I got going on in my brain. If you are a new subscriber, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am kind of overwhelmed by the amount of people that have subbed recently, so thank you for the support, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Why do people murder? For some, it's hate, jealousy, revenge, money. But for others, the motive is a little less clear. Maybe it's something subconscious in their brain, a trigger, a childhood event, or trauma. Well, today we're going to be talking about a woman whose motive was very clear from the start, but whose crimes went unnoticed within the walls of her murder factory. Let's talk about Amy Archer-Gilligan. Amy was born in Milton, Connecticut in October of 1873, and she was one of 10 children, which the 1800s are wild. People just had babies and died. Anyway, since this is such an old case, I couldn't find much about Amy's childhood or her family life, other than the fact that at some points in their life, one of her brothers and one of her sisters were in the Connecticut General Hospital for the Insane. In 1897, Amy married a man named James Archer, and then during that same year, they had a daughter whose name was Mary J. Then in 1901, the Archers decided to move in and start taking care of an elderly man named John Seymour. So the Archers actually had a pretty good deal. They got to live in John's Newington home in exchange for John's care. They got room and board, and so honestly, the Archers were doing pretty well for themselves. So when John ended up passing away, his loved ones actually continued to rent the home out to the Archer family, and at this point, they then converted John Seymour's home into Sister Amy's nursing home for the elderly. By 1907, John Seymour's family decided that they wanted to sell the house, and so the Archers got up and moved to Windsor, Connecticut, where they opened their brand new care facility called the Archer Home for Elderly People and Chronic Invalids on Prospect Street. Very catchy, very easy to remember. The marketing team that they had was impeccable. The Archer family advertised for their homes in newspapers and even sent out postcards. They were charging anywhere from $7 to $25 per week for care, or you could do a lifetime option, which was $1,000 as a flat rate, and most people picked this second option. In the early 1900s, times were really changing. Younger families that used to once accept their older parents and grandparents into their home to stay with them, well, they were now moving to bigger cities to pursue their dreams, higher wages, and things like that. So this left a lot of elderly people in need of help. The Archers were actually pioneers in their field. I mean, not a lot of care facilities were open, and this really gave an opportunity for elderly people to not only have the care that they needed, but to have that connection with other people too as they aged. So it was a relatively new concept, but the Archers were doing pretty well for themselves with their business. Then in 1909, a family actually came forward and sued the Archers for being neglectful of their elderly family member. The matter was settled out of court for about $5,000 or $170,000 in today's money. And so it kind of slid under the rug because there wasn't a court case or anything about it. It just was settled out of court and everything went back to normal. The following year in 1910, James Archer passed away, leaving Amy to care not only for her daughter, but also for the business, and she began to struggle financially. She had to pay for her daughter's tuition, along with piano lessons, and then the ever-expanding cost of living. She began to really struggle and have a hard time making money. That being said, life went on, Amy got through it, and then in 1913, Amy married her second husband, Michael Gilligan. It was alleged that on their marriage certificate, Amy actually shaved a few years off of her age, which is like, girl, you're not fooling anyone. Look at these pictures. Girl, come on. You don't gotta do all that. If Michael really loved you, he wouldn't mind how old you are. Okay, girl, but whatever. Amy's doing the best she can at this point, right? Then, after being married for just a few months, Michael passed away in February of 1914 from what the doctors called a valvular heart disease in conjunction with an acute bilious attack. So basically like really extreme indigestion from what I understand, which isn't funny, but like I do feel like I'm dying sometimes when I have indigestion, so it's scary that the doctors actually thought that he died from that. So as you can probably imagine, Michael's family became immediately suspicious of Amy because he had given her his entire estate, which was about $4,000 or $123,000 in today's money. So that's quite a bit of cash that Amy just suddenly inherited after only being married to Michael for a few months. So at this point, Amy was doing pretty well for herself. She had this newfound inheritance from her dead husband, and her care facility was doing pretty well. A lot of people came to her care facility for excellent care. Amy was doing well, at least for now. So like I mentioned, a lot of Amy's patients didn't really have close family. That is, almost everybody, except for one man named Franklin Andrews. He would write to his family pretty frequently. He talked about the care facility, the patients that he met, the little tasks and chores that he would do for Amy, and how a lot of the residents at this home were dropping like flies. They were dying at an extreme rate. Franklin was about 60 years old and a healthy person. One day he was painting the fence around the care facility when he suddenly collapsed. I couldn't figure out the cause of why he collapsed, if it was maybe from heat or exhaustion. It was May, so maybe it was hot that day, or if he had an illness that just wasn't identified. But either way, 2 days later, he was dead. A gastric ulcer was determined to be the cause of death, and life went on at Amy's care facility. Shortly after his death, Franklin's sister Nellie was going through some of his things when she found a few different letters between Amy and Franklin. In these conversations, it seemed that Amy was pestering Franklin for money, and it also appears that at some point, Franklin actually loaned Amy $500. Nellie was immediately concerned that there was some sort of foul play going on with her brother's death, and so she brought the information that she had to first the state attorney, and when the state attorney kind of blew her off, she then went to the local newspaper. One of the writers at the newspaper, a man named Carlin Gosley, actually agreed with Nellie and definitely thought that there was something strange going on. Carlin actually wrote most of the obituaries for the town, and he was noticing that a lot of the deaths were coming out of Amy's care facility. The newspaper also meticulously went through all of the deaths that had happened at Amy's care facility from 1907 to 1916, and then compared them to other local care facilities in the area. So what they found is that 12 people died at Amy's care facility between the years of 1907 and 1911, but then a whopping 48 people died between the years of 1911 and 1916. So something weird's going on, right? And they could obviously tell this almost immediately. And let's look at these numbers, right? Because when they compared it to the other care facilities, they were pretty comparable. But then they realized that the other care facilities had 7 times the amount of people than Amy's care facility. So something was not adding up, and Amy was just looking more and more suspicious. And then there were the causes of death. Almost all of the deaths happened either from some sort of sudden illness or from gastric illness. This coincidentally aligned up with the time that Amy was buying her large amounts of arsenic. And I think it went under the radar for so long because sometimes Amy would send her patients to the drugstore on like a little errand and they would buy the arsenic. So first of all, that's kind of twisted because they might have been buying their own poison. But either way, records showed that she was buying enough arsenic to kill like over 100 people. To add even more fuel to the fire, evidence really pointed to the fact that every time a resident would loan Amy any sort of money, they would die almost immediately after. So after gathering all this evidence, the newspaper finally felt confident enough to bring all this to the police, and they opened an investigation and decided to exhume some of the bodies. Franklin, Amy's second husband Michael, and 3 other bodies were all exhumed and examined very carefully. And the medical examiner noted that on Franklin's body specifically, he had enough arsenic in his stomach to kill at least 6 people. So after all was said and done, it was determined that all 5 bodies had been poisoned with arsenic. And on top of that, at this time it was also discovered that Amy's second husband, Michael Gilligan, His will was forged. And who had forged it? Amy, leaving everything to her. The investigation spanned over the course of a year, and then on May 8th of 1916, Amy Archer-Gilligan was charged with 5 counts of murder. However, this was reduced down to just the murder charge for Franklin Andrews. Her trial began in June of 1917. The trial lasted about a month, and then at the end of it, she was sentenced to hang for her crimes. Her lawyers then appealed this decision, and her second trial started in June of 1919. This time, Amy went for the insanity plea, right? And this reduced her sentence down to a second-degree murder charge, and she was sentenced to life in prison. At some point in her sentence, Amy was transferred to an insane asylum where she then died in 1962. So this Black Widow story follows the horrendous crimes of Amy Archer-Gilligan. However, something did come out of this that was good. In 1917, the year of Amy's first trial, Connecticut actually passed a law stating that nursing homes and care facilities needed to have regular inspections and regulations that they needed to follow. Not only that, but they began to require licenses for people to have care facilities, and they required that all care facilities actually hand over their death certificates at the end of the year so that they could make sure that a crime like this would never happen again. That was the twisted story of Amy Archer-Gilligan. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. We haven't really talked about a woman killer on this channel yet. I mean, there is a cult video. It's pretty old. It's like almost a year old at this point, but she didn't really actually kill anybody. But this woman's evil. Make sure to leave in the comments below if there's a topic that you guys want me to talk about, if there's something that you guys would be interested to hear about. Let me know, because I'm always open to new ideas. Otherwise, I'm just kind of going at random, whatever seems interesting to me, and it might not always be interesting to you guys. So let me know. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and keep being the bad bitches that you are. Bye, guys.